G'day guys, welcome to another episode of the Pumped on Property Show. Now I'm sitting here with my sister Crystal. So good to be back on tape with you. It's just been an epic chat. We're actually filming this little intro after we've just recorded what was supposed to be 20 minutes, but we just couldn't help ourselves talking about all the crazy stuff you've been through and some of the lessons we've learned along the way.
Yeah, it's really awesome. Like, you and I have obviously done a lot. We've helped a lot of people. It's just really cool to look back over the last sort of 6-7 years of working together and sort of the fundamentals that we really feel have been important lessons that we've kind of learned along the way.
Hey Chris, so welcome back to the show. It's so good to have you back on camera.
I know.
It's been way too long since me and you did it together.
Oh, a few years, yeah.
Like when? 2018, you reckon we did the last one together?
Probably, yeah. I reckon I was pregnant with Asha.
Seriously.
Yeah.
So what have you been up to? Like, what's been going on in your world with the kids, with the business, with Matt, with your life?
Yeah, fair bit. So we've just been, spending the last year renovating our house. We moved into a year and a half ago now. It just feels like every waking moment where we're not working, we're kind of just pottering away there. The last few days I've been like washing down the outside of the house, which has been super fun.
How have you been doing that?
Literally by hand. So it's come out really nice. But yeah, like literally the last couple of years, obviously since I was on the podcast, we had 2 kids, we've bought and sold a couple of houses and really just focusing on making our latest house our home, kind of just spending time in the garden, playing with the boys, painting, all of those sort of fun things. But it's really fun when it's your own.
For sure. It's funny, like watching what that house was. And for anyone that's interested, we did a Crystal's Dream Home tour. You can go across to YouTube and check that out. But it is like such a beautiful home when you bought it, and now it's like incredible. It's like, I swear it's the Sunny Coast best pool.
Yeah, I know. We're stoked. It's so awesome, and that's pretty much all we do. Like, I just spend my time with the kids, spend my time kind of pottering around the house, working. It's good to be back at work. It's been a few months now, and
so
after having kids, trying to get my head back into the market. So, been awesome.
No, that's sick. And I think it's funny, like, because if we had have done a podcast in 18, we would have been like, this goal, that goal, we want to do this thing, we want to buy these properties, and now it's like, we just want to spend time with our kids, having a good time and help our clients have a simpler life.
Yeah, super simple.
Awesome. So today we're going to talk about 10 things that Crystal and I wish we knew sooner. Between us, we've probably bought 800 or 900 properties for clients, and more than a couple of handfuls probably between each other as well. We've learned a lot of lessons the easy way and many, many more lessons the hard way. So to kick things off, what is one of the things that you sort of learnt the hard way, or what is one of the things that you wish you knew sooner?
So I guess for me, quality is really important. It's what we apply with our own investing, what we teach our clients to do. So things like identifying a market. We really love areas, sort of metro markets close to the city or close to major regional hubs like here on the Sunshine Coast. Personally, they're the types of areas I've bought over the last 5-6 years myself. Identifying suburbs within those markets as well. So we'll go into it a little bit more detail later, but sort of the key performance indicators and how to choose a good quality suburb. Size of the land is also super important. So the bigger the parcel of land, the better. Obviously the land appreciates and the house depreciates. So always really keen on trying to buy as big a land size as possible. And also the street that property is located on. So the street within the suburb within the market, the land that is on the street. I think those things are really important, and they kind of build the foundations of a quality property, and they're things that I've applied in my own investing over the last few years.
You know, me and you have got an OCD amount of indicators that we look at for ourselves and for clients, but stripping all of that back, you effectively just want something that you would raise your kids on.
Yeah.
Now, I've got a client at the moment, Sean, she's living in Sydney, an absolute baller legend, definitely like a go-getter. And, you know, I showed her a property yesterday for just over 500K that had fallen over in the market and we'd gotten back. And she's like, well, I don't really like the look of it. And I'm like, it's because you're living in a $2 million house in Bondi and, you know, you've got a $500K budget. So it is relative, obviously. Like if you've got a $1 million budget, then you can get that $1 million suburb or postcode, but you've got to start where you are. Like I think my first investment was $360K. My second was 213. I know you started with very, very affordable properties in the North Brizzy beaches as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think stripping away that ego when you're identifying quality is really important. Just because you can't afford to be right close to the city or on the water or have a double-story home doesn't mean you can't afford quality or what represents quality for that particular market that you're buying into.
I love that. So, you know, the first thing or the second thing in this video, but the first thing for me that I mislearnt the wrong way was strategy. No one was doing podcasts or videos when I first started about 11 years ago. And so I was reading books and the books were all hype. It was like, I bought this property and I'm worth this amount of money. And I'm like, but how did you do it? And so I went and bought a whole bunch of stuff and then realized about 8 years into or 7-8 years into my journey that the stuff that I bought was okay. And it would work out by the time I was 70. But it wasn't going to get me to financial freedom in my 40s. And so I think I bought 9 properties and I ended up selling 7 of them and then basically restarted my portfolio from scratch around exactly what you said, like big land, quality homes, great suburbs, better quality markets, and just really applied the fundamentals. And because of that, it's ratcheted up where like Simon, our brother, had learnt the lessons off you and I. And so his portfolio went straight to quality. And because of that, his gains have absolutely outperformed the averages.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that strategy is really important as well. Like I was pretty fortunate to come into my investing journey after I'd already been working with Pumped for about a year and I had learned off you. You'd been doing it for 10 or so years before me. So Simon and I
really knew as much back then as we know now though. Like the strategy wasn't as clean as it is now.
No, strategy's definitely improved. But I've done the same. Of the few properties I've bought, I've sold a couple because I've just realised that for me to get to where I wanted to be or have that simpler portfolio. And everyone's strategy is different. What yours looks like is probably different to mine. And because I am just wanting a really simple life with my kids and I don't want to overextend myself and I want to get to a point where we don't have to work 5-6 days a week just to meet our baseline. I have, sold a few properties along the way and changed my strategy along the way to make sure that what I'm doing is in alignment with my bigger picture. And I think that's what's important with strategy.
Like it is all about remembering that property is the vehicle to get you and your family from where you are to where you want to be. So talk me through the strategy you had, 6.5 years ago versus the strategy you have today. Because I think that turning point once you have kids is important. It's like, I don't really want to work 5 days anymore and miss my kids growing up.
For me, when my husband and I first started buying properties, we really wanted a whole heap of properties, maybe like 5 that we'd hold at any given time, that all had renovation potential, that we could kind of renovate one, sell it, move into the next one, kind of just have this domino effect. He's a builder, so we thought that strategy was perfect for us. Now we have kids, we just want 2 or 3 properties, so the one we live in and 2 quality investments because we don't have time to be driving to Brisbane or driving around Queensland to renovate these homes like we used to, and we don't want to be spending our weekends doing that. Granted, what we did and the properties we sold set us up, so it was great that strategy did work for the first half of our investing, and I'm sure maybe when the kids get older we'll revisit that type of strategy. But for now it's just really quite simple. We've sort of got quality properties in good suburbs. One of them's about 50 metres to the water in North Brisbane. Another one is on like a big corner block that does have that renovation potential, but it's been tenanted by the same guys for like 15 years. So for us, it's like a really low maintenance approach. And then the home that we live in, which we sold what we lived in to move into something better, what we deem as better. And I guess...
It's definitely better. It's way nicer.
It's a way nicer home.
The other house is beautiful too, but holy shit.
And so I guess we've just kind of tried to simplify it and hold better quality properties that we can see holding for the long term, that don't need that renovation immediately, because that higher maintenance approach right now is just not where our head's at, I guess.
Beautiful. I love that. So let's talk about, another thing that we've probably learned the easy/hard way.
So the third thing for me is that you don't need to apply it all at once. You don't need to take every step at the same time. You just need to sort of take that first step. I guess it's all well and good to have that strategy, have an idea of what your life is going to look like 10 years from now. But the main thing is you just need to take that first step, really. It's sort of knowing what you want to happen, but also trusting the process and knowing that if you do sort of take action on that first one, that you'll eventually get there bit by bit. A lot of our clients get really bogged down in, I want to buy 3 properties in the next 3 years. If I buy this one and it rents for this, what's the next one going to look like? And the reality is the market's constantly changing. These sorts of things do take a little bit of time. And as long as you go the first property first, you'll eventually begin to realise that the other dominoes will start falling into place. And I know for me, like you said, 3, 4, 5 years ago, I was very bullish and very just wanting to do this, and I was willing to work the 80-hour weeks to make it happen. Yeah. And it was great to do it then. But yeah, I guess sometimes you can get caught up in your own head in those sorts of instances, and you just want everything to happen at once when you get pretty excited about what you want your life to look like.
I think I spent so much time living in the future back then that I almost wasn't in the present. And so it was like, this property plus that property would equal this result. But all I really wanted was, presence, feeling at peace in myself and spending time with the people I care about. And it's funny, how long it takes. Like, everyone gets to that point. It's just a matter of when. And, I think the fastest way to it sometimes is to do too much at the beginning and then realise that too much isn't necessarily more.
Yeah, for sure.
Another thing that's been really helpful for me has been building out that team of advisors. So we surround ourselves with solicitors, barristers, accountants, tax depreciation people, building and pest inspectors, mortgage brokers, builders like electricians, pool safety guys, great property managers. And the combination of those people sort of having our back and supporting us has been really powerful, because it's not that I don't trust my ability to make decisions. It's just I can really only stay in my lane, which is property and property, market identification. I really lean on those other people to make sure they're identifying the red flags. And, so many times I've gone to buy a place and then the town planner or the building and pest inspector or the builders had a look at it and gone, I just don't think you should do it. And it's like the quality of that team means that the quality of my decisions are better.
Yeah.
And most importantly, after I've bought the property, when I have that freak out of like, holy, I've done this.
Yeah.
I know that the boxes are being ticked, and it gives me that logical justification for the decision.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's so important. The team is really, really vital, and you can pull away from decisions. So I think for me, that's been the biggest thing, is like, I get a little bit excited. I see a property. I'm like, I'm going to buy this today, speak to my broker, do this, and then I actually run it past the town planner or the property manager and ask them what their opinion would be in the current market. And it completely changes the decision. And I go, cool, I'm not going to buy that property now. And I think that has been more important than anything, the decisions I haven't made, more than the decisions I have made, because it's meant I could put my money in a better property because of the team that I've been able to lean on.
Yeah, and even going a step further than that, like having yourself, Simon, Hayden, and a whole bunch of other advisors around me, like my brokers, who was really helpful for a long time. Like, he'd bought over 25 properties, and then my accountant as well, who's extremely risk adverse, has just been really, really helpful to sort of pick their brains over a long period of time and then collect those tools that make everything so much easier.
Yeah, most definitely. Having those friends and things you can soundboard ideas off, because you don't always have a friendship circle you want to talk to about this sort of stuff, but just having, people around you that can kind of vent ideas and that sort of thing, I think it's really, really helpful.
Awesome. So moving on from that one, let's talk about one of my favourite ones, which is market timing. Now, your portfolio is the epitome of nailing market timing. You not just nailed the right state when we decided to transition out of Sydney, Central Coast, Wollongong into Brisbane, but then the specific suburbs after we looked at everything on the sunny coast and everything in Brisbane as well. Yeah. And then within those suburbs, the right types of properties as well. So let's talk about timing.
Yeah, so timing's been really, really important. Sometimes I like to call it luck, but there's been a bit of strategy there. So, for example, the first property we bought down in North Brisbane was purchased just after an extension to the train line was announced. So, North Brisbane didn't have a train line out to the Redcliffe Peninsula. That was announced but wasn't complete until about 2017, 2018. We purchased, though, in 2016, I think it was. So the infrastructure plans were there. A lot of hype came just after that announcement came. People like Heron Todd White had Brisbane sort of start of recovery, approaching that recovery phase around that 2017, 2018 time period as well. So there's a few market indicators to point to that kind of heading into a rising market. I think the university in Petrie, so the Sunshine Coast University expansion was also announced. So everyone on every property forum at that time of the market were really talking about North Brisbane as kind of the next place to go. So yeah, that market timing really paid off for us, and we bought a couple down in North Brisbane at that time.
You know, I think one of the other things that made that timing so special was when we looked at the long-term average from Homely, and we realised that Brisbane had done 9.7% averaged out over 46 years leading up to that point. We went, wow. And then we looked at the 10-year performance, and those beaches at that time had only grown by 2.5% to 3% per year. And we went, there's a huge opportunity here. At that point, they'd been sitting flat for almost 10 years.
Yeah.
And because of that, there was a catch-up. And there's many, many suburbs in Brisbane that still look like those beaches did back in 2017 now that are so undervalued, and I'm so excited about.
Yeah, most definitely.
So moving off timing, one of the things that I had in my personality was like I really wanted to get it all right. Like I'm definitely like a bit OCD and a perfectionist by nature.
Same.
I think growing up with a professional cleaning mum and a business person dad, it's just in our blood.
Yeah.
And I really didn't want to make mistakes, but like as an investor, you don't know what you don't know.
No.
And that was really, really tricky. Like just not having a sense of like, I didn't realize how important the key performance indicators were. I didn't realize what the fundamentals of investing were. I didn't really have a community or a team or a plan at that time. And so it was very easy to buy properties like once you save your ass off and get the deposit, but it was very, very difficult to go to that point of like, have I bought the right stuff?
Yeah.
And then once I realized I had, like just going, like being open enough to go, okay, I've made some mistakes, I've learned the hard way on a few things.
Yeah.
I'm going to really double down and try and start figuring out like, not that I wanted to get everything right, but because I know I'm still making mistakes now, but I wanted to have like a series of like, this is how I inspect a property, this is how I identify a market, this is how I review a suburb, this is the team of people that I have in place to protect me. So it was like those mistakes were minimised more and more over time.
For sure. No, I think that's really important. Like you don't have to know everything from the outset, and I guess being pretty humble and leaning on people around you for advice, or admitting when, not even admitting, but letting go when something hasn't gone the way you planned it to, and potentially selling that property like we've both done over the years and that sort of thing, to get it to a point where you're starting to apply what you do feel is like the right strategy for you.
You know, I really like that because you're going to have poor advice from the wrong advisors, unfortunately. If you're Googling them or you're getting recommended from a mate, you're not always going to nail the area. Sometimes you're going to buy closer to where you live because there's like a location bias there. You know, sometimes the plan that you have will get boring, and that's what happened to me. And so, you know, buying houses and renovating them was pretty easy. So I went on to build, subdivide, Airbnb, knock down, renovate, granny flats. And it's like, create an interesting life and have a really simple investment strategy is like what I've learned more than anything else throughout this process.
Yeah, for sure. So the next thing that I think is really important, and we both drill down on so hard, is understanding the key performance indicators or KPIs of a suburb. There's so many that you could really get stuck into, but I think three of the things that we really find super important are things like vacancy rates, the demographics of an area, and sort of the 10-year average market performance. So we'll go into each of those in a little bit more detail. Vacancy rates is a really good indication of how well a suburb's performing, because it kind of leans into that supply and demand in terms of how many people out there are looking for rentals, what's vacant. Right now, the averages across Australia are sitting, about 1%, I heard recently.
Insane. Like it's the lowest level in 20 years plus.
So Australia in general is super undersupplied from a rental perspective. Some of the suburbs we're buying in Brisbane have vacancy rates as low as like 0.4%, 0.2%. So some of these areas you look and there's a population of 20,000 people with 3 4-bedroom homes currently for rent in total. Like it's absolutely insane. So that's sort of blanketed across Australia right now because there's a big undersupply, but overall vacancy rates is really important in getting a gauge of, I guess, how well a suburb's performing, how many people there are looking for rentals, how many properties are sitting vacant and that sort of thing. Which then leads into demographics as well. So things that we really like to look at with demographics is the size of the population is pretty important, but things like how many renters to own occupiers there are in a suburb. Ideally, we like to buy in areas with a higher percentage of owner occupiers versus renters. Again, that's really important because they're the types of areas you and I would want to live. You're investing your money in areas that are surrounded with, I guess, other owners and things like that. Average income or weekly income, I think, is really important as well. We like to target areas that have, I guess, more than about $1,000 a week income, depending on the area though. Obviously that's going to change with your budget in terms of what we talked about earlier, the quality of the suburb you can get into with the money that you have to buy with. But those sorts of demographics are really important in understanding the quality of a suburb, and those key performance indicators I think are really important. I know you wanted to touch on sort of that 10-year average performance as well.
Yeah, like I completely agree with everything you've said. Like a vacancy rate below 2% is a good indicator that an area is undersupplied. And then, the more people are owning, the more they can pay for the houses in the future. Remember Kedron, like 6.5 years ago, we were buying there for like 550K.
Yep.
And at the time, the incomes were about $900 a week, and there was quite a high percentage of renters. Sort of 6.5 years on, a good home's now selling for almost $2 million, and an income earner's earning, $4,000 a week there now.
Yeah.
So things change as well. And it's important to go for quality and apply those fundamentals.
Yeah.
But when we talk about 10-year averages, it's a really, really good peek into, is a market undervalued, accurately valued or overvalued at the moment? So if you look at your Sydneys, your Melbournes, your Brisbanes, your Perths, your Adelaides, they've all done about 9% a year for the last 50 years.
Crazy.
Brisbane's
So consistent.
so consistent when you average it out. But there's been years where it's lost 20%, 30%. There's years where it's gone up by that much as well. It's a bumpy consistency. And what I do then is I look at, for example, the 280 different suburbs in Brisbane across these indicators, and I go, this suburb like Cannon Hill that we used to buy 5-6 years ago that had at that time only grown by 3% per year has now gone from 600K to 1.5 mil. And if you look at the 10-year average, it's now averaged about 10% per year. So I would go, that's actually slightly overvalued because it's beaten the long-term history.
Yeah.
But this suburb 10 kilometres from Cannon Hill has only grown by 2% per year, and the suburb sitting directly next to it has grown by 8% per year for the last 10. And so you can start to get a bit of a peek into, is this area sitting in a place where I can expect not just long-term gains, which we will receive in any capital city in Australia, but short-term performance as well. And that's the stuff that excites me when you're like, oh shit, I just want to check out those 7 suburbs like we found a few weeks ago. And we're like, wow, this is like dead set those suburbs from 6 years ago.
Yeah, there's some really exciting things like that out at the moment, especially because the Southeast Queensland market's gotten pretty nuts in the last sort of 24 months. There's some suburbs that you look at and you're like, why is this so undervalued compared to the suburb literally 2 kilometres away? And you look at those key performance indicators and it's sort of waiting for that trigger to pull, and it's like just a matter of time because they're sitting so undervalued in comparison to areas so nearby.
We probably would have bought 50 properties in Acacia Ridge back in the day, and at that time what were we buying houses for, like 310 to 350? And we were just looking at the suburb next to it, Sunnybank Hills, and I'm like, this place is $1 million at that point.
Yeah.
And literally across one road. It was one road across, you could buy the same property for 300K. And we bought it up, and I was looking online the other day. I haven't looked at the suburb for about 4 or 5 years, and those houses are now selling for $700,000 to $800,000. I'm like, it did it.
I know.
Statistically speaking, it was sitting at 1.5% versus Sunnybank 6 at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. No, really exciting. So those key performance indicators, like I said, there's so many you can get into. Distances to city, walk scores, DSR scores, so many other bits and pieces that are also really important. But vacancy rates, demographics, and that 10-year average is really exciting to us.
For sure. So the next one, despite everything we've talked about in this video that would maybe feel to the contrary, investing is actually really easy. So there's only really 2 things or 3 things to do as an investor. Either save money for your next deposit, or if you own enough properties, pay off the debt on them, or if you don't have enough properties, then buy a property. Like, it's really that simple. Save your money, pay off the debt, or buy another property. And it's like you're constantly rotating between those 3 things.
Yeah.
The actual buying phase, which is like the glitz and glamour side of it, is such a short percentage of what you do. Most of the time you're saving your ass off, or you're paying off debt because you feel a bit uncomfortable about it. Yeah,
for sure. I definitely think that's puts it into pretty simple terms, but that's exactly what you and I have done. It's sort of like we worked really, really hard. There was a point in time when my husband and I were working, and you've done the same, like 60, 70-hour weeks just to save that deposit, get ahead, buy a property, buy the property, maybe leverage off that property to buy another one where we could, or if we could, and then get to a point where it's like, okay, crap, now I just got to take it easy for a year or 2, pay down a little bit of that, maybe rejig the portfolio. We renovated one. These are the sorts of things that we did to kind of just make ourselves feel comfortable about the debt that we were holding at the time. But overall, it is really simple, which I guess sort of leads me to the next one, which is take action.
So many people, like I remember this one client that originally emailed me before we even started the business when this was just a blog. And he's like, Ben, what do you think about Brisbane? And I'm like, I like it for these reasons.
Yeah. And
every single year for the last 7 or 8 years, like since I was doing that blog, he emailed me and he still hasn't bought a fucking property. And I'm like, man, I look back at the emails each year and I'm like, this suburb has gone up $1 million. This suburb's gone up 300K. This one's gone up 50K. I'm like, just some people just get completely caught in their own way. It's analysis paralysis. It's information overload, or it's just so much fear. And it's just like 1 or 2 good decisions in Sydney 10 years ago, in Melbourne 10 years ago, or 1 or 2 good decisions in Brisbane now in 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
You know, you'll think you're a genius, but it's really just taking a tiny bit of action.
Yeah, so taking action is really important. It obviously is just that making that first step, making a decision to do something other than nothing and have your money working for you in the market is really, really important. And what's the last thing that you want to talk about, which I think is the most exciting one?
Yeah, I might just say one thing actually to taking action. It's like the first thing I say when I sit down and work out, educate the clients on the market and listen to their goals and help them formulate a bit of like a property idea is at some point during this journey, you're going to freak out. Yeah. Whether it's when you sign up with us, whether it's when you sit with me about the strategy, or whether it's when you get to the point where we're actually talking about a specific property and going really, really, really deep into the property for consideration part of the process.
Yeah.
And it's like, or it's after that and you bought it and it hasn't been rented out yet and you're in the paperwork and it's freaky. And it's like the biggest thing about property and getting into debt is it brings up all of like the trauma and past and fear that you have that maybe you don't even know you're operating in. And a few times I've made the mistake of saying to clients, like, just really push that pain button of like, I told you this was going to be scary and that you were going to freak out. And they're like, I'm not freaking out. I'm like, holy, I'm just sort of saying that like, this is that part of the journey that everyone ends up in that low point. But moving through that, it's completely changed our lives for the better.
Oh, for sure. Like, don't get me wrong, it's scary as all hell. There's been moments like where you and I have just gone into these like anxiety spins because it's like, what have I done? Have I made the right decision? But yeah, looking on few years down the track, it's definitely been the right decision. It's just taken some hindsight to realise it, I think.
You know, thankfully your spins were momentary. I feel like I just spun for about 3 years at one point. I'll never forget when we were cruising down to Brisbane together. I think it was like the third property you'd bought, or maybe the second.
Second, I think, yeah.
And you knew, like, you have a photographic memory, and you were like, you know, every single street, because we'd bought over 200 properties in the area over the 3 years leading up to that.
Yeah.
And I think we were driving down there to the house to inspect it, and you couldn't remember the way.
Yeah,
and I didn't have it in Google Maps because we knew the area so well. And I thought you were like, I think, were you driving?
I was driving, yeah.
And I thought, like, she knows where we're going. And we drove around in circles for about 35 minutes. And I'm like, I'm just like, you know, we've driven past the street 3 times. Like, the anxiety and the fear associated, even for us, you'd bought properties. You knew the area, you knew that it was a winner.
Yeah.
You had bought the area for hundreds of people, and still that crept up. And like, I just want you guys to know that, like, no matter where you're at, whether it's property 10 or property 1, you're gonna feel it at some point. Like, I had a monster freak out a week ago.
Yeah.
Because I just bought another place the week before that, and it's like, what have I done? Have I made a mistake? And then it's like, nah, like, this is where you want to be going, and this was the right thing to do, and you've been looking at that suburb for 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of the things we've touched on today reaffirms the logic behind these decisions. It's sort of like, it's all well and good to take action, but if you're taking action on a quality property in a quality area, you're looking at those KPIs, you're reaffirming a lot of the things we've spoken about and always speak about, then taking action doesn't seem as scary. You're still going to have that freak out. But when you have that freak out, you can revert back to the logic and go, hang on a minute, I'm doing it for this, this and this reason. It aligns with my strategy. It all makes sense for these really important parameters. And it's kind of like, okay, I can breathe easy now and sort of move through this decision a little bit, I guess, a little bit easier.
You know, that perfectly leads on to the last thing I wanted to discuss, which is point 10 of the things that I wish I knew sooner. And that is, property is really long term.
Yeah.
You know, in fact, 60% of people that buy property in their first 5 years lose money because they either buy at the wrong time of the cycle or they sell too early. And with the entry costs, holding costs and exit costs, they actually lose. So property really is a 15 to 20 year journey. At 23, when I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, as well as John McGrath's book, I decided at 23 that I'd be free by 30. I'm now 36 and I'm still not financially free. And I'm like, I can see the light at the end of a very long tunnel.
Yeah.
But it's just recognizing, like, I wish I could sit with my previous self when I was at property 1, 2, 3, 4 and just go, it's going to take time, and just enjoy the journey. And, you know, when the freakouts come up, accept them. And when the good things come up, like, pat yourself on the back for the activity and just be in the moment, because whether you are or you aren't in the moment, like, it's, you know, it's still going to happen over a longer period than you expect. Yeah,
definitely. And I think enjoying the process with anything is the most important thing, because you could get so bogged down in the numbers, in the data, in the strategy, and whether or not you want to sell the property in 5 years or hold it for 15 years or renovate. Like I said, my husband and I spent a lot of time buying properties that we planned on renovating, but we've gotten to a point where we just want to have a cruisier life. We want to spend time with our kids. We want to take a step back from work and not have to work such long hours. We want to know that the properties we're holding, whether we do anything with them or not, they're still going to be quality investments long term, and we could never choose to make another decision in the rest of our lives and know that in 20 years' time we'll be in a really good position for the action we took 5 years ago, 2 years ago and now, and just enjoying that process. I'm sure there will be other investing that we do over the course of our life, but we don't feel like we have to rush the process or anything like that. We just feel like we can kind of enjoy it, live in the moment at this point of our life.
Can I ask you, like, because as someone who obviously has been in business for a long time, like, learned a lot of things, had children and a career and bought investments and renovated and moved a whole bunch of times, like, what does having that baseline level of portfolio that will mean that you've got financial freedom when you own them outright in the future, and you are going to have a stable life that a lot of people in Australia don't get, how does that make you feel as you transition through, like, the crazy stage of really young kids and an intense job?
I think it is really reassuring. Like, it's stressful. Don't get me wrong. My husband and I have times where we're like, should we sell a property? What should we do? Should we, like, do we need to take on more work? Do I need to go back to work an extra day a week? Like, those moments do come and go. But overall, I think it's really reassuring that the decisions we did make a couple of years ago are and have set us up and will continue to set us up. Like I said, if we never do another thing and just pay those properties off over the next 20 years, we're going to be in a better position than probably 95% of people that I know. And it just makes you realise that while working isn't the end goal, I guess, like we love what we do. Matt's a builder. He loves it. He loves being handy, and I think no matter what he does, he'll always do something in that field. I love property as well, and I love what I do, being able to help people, being able to buy property myself, being in that industry. But it's also reassuring to know that we don't have to do that into our 70s if we don't want to, and we don't have to now trade time away from our kids. We have had to, don't get me wrong, but we don't have to trade time away from our kids to even buy our first property or anything like that. So it's really reassuring, I think, to know that by making those decisions, we've put ourselves in this position, I guess.
I love that. I think it takes a massive amount of the pressure off. And, you know, at the end of the day, Crystal and I are absolutely obsessed with the details because they do matter. But we also get like the absolute human and emotional element to what we do here as well. And I'm just so grateful to have gone through everything we've gone through. It's been a hell of a ride.
Yeah, for sure.
I wish I could like GoPro it and watch it, like all the tears, all the pain, all of the high fives, all of the laughs and all of the funny stuff that we've done. Like I was just thinking the other day about when we used to cruise down once a month to Brizzy together and we would like, I'd drive around and we'd go out for a long lunch and just sort of get a bit like you guys would have a few drinks and then I'd drive you around to the properties in the afternoon and we'd just talk trash with the agents and just have a hell time. And like I'm so grateful for this whole journey and I'm grateful that myself, Simon, Crystal are here to support you guys with the lessons that we've learned so that you don't make the same mistakes that we did and hopefully you can take that, go and smash it yourself or maybe even become one of the small number of people that we take on each month in the future. But either way, we wish you all the best with everything you're doing and thanks for today.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Whew, that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Getting cool,
spin.
bro. Yeah. Oh, sweaty. So sweaty. Oh, that's good. That's so nice.
Oh.